The keycard beeped red. Darcy Lefebvre stood in the corridor of the 23rd floor, still in her hospital scrubs, her lanyard pressed against the door sensor of the apartment she had lived in for 6 years. The hallway smelled like carpet cleaner, and the faint perfume of the woman in 2304 who always overdid it on Fridays. Everything was normal, everything was exactly as it always was. Except the door wouldn't open. She tried again. Red. She tried a third time, pressing the card flat against the panel, the way Troy had shown her when the sensor was being temperamental red. Darcy stepped back and looked at the door. Their door, with the small wreath she'd hung last autumn that Troy always said, looked tacky, but never took down himself. Her feet ached from 14 hours on a hospital ward. Her shoulders carried the particular heaviness of 2 resuscitations and a 6-year-old, with a fever that had scared everyone until it didn't. All she wanted was a shower and something to eat that wasn't from the vending machine on the 3rd floor. She knocked. The door opened. But it wasn't Troy standing there. It was a woman Darcy had never seen before, mid-20s, long dark hair loose, wearing the gray cardigan Darcy had left on the back of the bedroom chair that morning when she'd rushed out. Her cardigan, her chair, her door. "Oh," the woman said. She didn't look startled, she looked inconvenienced. Troy appeared behind her a moment later, his shirt untucked, a glass of scotch in his hand. His expression did not change when he saw Darcy. That was the thing she would remember long after everything else blurred. He didn't look ashamed. He didn't look surprised. He looked almost relieved, the way a person looks when they've been waiting for something unpleasant to be over. "Darcy. What is this?" Her voice came out quieter than she expected. "Trush, who is she, and why is she wearing my sweater?" "Her name is Chelsea." He took a sip of his scotch, "and I had the super change the locks this afternoon." The hallway tilted. Darcy put a hand on the wall. "You changed the locks?" "I've been meaning to tell you, he sighed, like this was all a bit tedious. "I didn't know how to do it cleanly, so this is me doing it." "Doing what, exactly?" "Ending this," he gestured, vaguely between them. "The marriage, Darcy, it's been over for a long time, you know that." "I don't know that." Her throat was closing around the words. "I come home after a 14-hour shift and find the locks changed and a stranger in my apartment, and I'm supposed to know that?" "Your things are in the storage unit downstairs. I had someone box them this afternoon, the super has the code." He started to close the door. "My lawyer's already been in touch with the building management about the lease transfer. You'll get papers in the next few days." Chelsea leaned against the door frame with the lazy ease of someone who had already decided she belonged there. "I know this must be hard," she said. "But Troy's been miserable for years, you must have seen it." Darcy stared at her. "That's my cardigan." "Oh." Chelsea looked down at it. She didn't take it off. "Troy." Darcy's voice cracked just once. "Can we please talk about this inside, not in the hallway?" "There's nothing to talk about, I'm done." His eyes were flat and cold, the eyes of a man who had rehearsed this. "Honestly, Darcy, you should have seen this coming. After what happened last year, the surgery, the recovery, the months of you just being absent, I needed someone who was actually present. Someone who wanted the same things I want. That's not you. Maybe it never was." The surgery. He was talking about the surgery. 8 months ago, when the ovarian cysts had been serious enough that the doctor had sat them both down in that small office and explained, carefully and with great kindness, that future pregnancies would be difficult and possibly impossible. Darcy had cried for 2 weeks. Troy had held her hand in the hospital and said the right things. And she had believed him when he said it didn't matter, that she was enough. She had believed him. "You're doing this because of the surgery." "I'm doing this because my life is going somewhere and I needed someone who could come with me." His voice rose just enough to carry. The door to 2308 opened a crack, then closed again. "You couldn't have children before and now you definitely can't, and I wasted enough time pretending that was fine." The words hit the way physical things hit, in the chest, behind the sternum, in the soft place where you kept the things you trusted people not to use against you. The doctor said there was still a chance. "I don't want a chance, Darcy, I want a life." He moved to close the door. "The storage code is 4471. Try to get your things out by end of next week." The door shut. Darcy stood in the hallway of her own building with the carpet cleaner smell, and the muffled sound of her own television through the door. Because he had kept the television too, apparently, and tried to understand what had just happened. She was still standing there 3 minutes later when the elevator opened. The man who stepped out was tall, in his early 40s, carrying a leather portfolio and a dry cleaning bag. He stopped when he saw her. He had dark hair threaded with gray at the temples, and the kind of face that had probably been called handsome so many times he'd stopped noticing. Darcy had met him twice, once at Troy's company Christmas dinner, once at a Bay Street charity event she'd dressed up for and spent most of the evening talking to the bartender. His name was Kendrick Holloway. He was the managing director of the investment firm where Troy had worked for 4 years. He had come to drop off a client portfolio. He had come upstairs himself instead of leaving it at the desk because he'd wanted to go over a few details in person. He looked at Darcy standing motionless in the hallway in her hospital scrubs, and immediately understood that something was very wrong. "Mrs. Lefebvre," he said it carefully, "are you all right?" "No." The word came out before she could dress it up in something more composed. "No, I'm really not." "Is Troy?" "He changed the locks." She heard herself say it and it still didn't make sense. "I've been at work since 5 this morning and he changed the locks, and there's a woman inside wearing my cardigan." Kendrick was quiet for a moment, then he said very evenly, "I came to drop off the Mercer file. Troy was supposed to review it this weekend." "Right. Late." "He's inside." "Yes," she swallowed with her. Kendrick set the dry cleaning bag against the wall. He knocked on the apartment door, 2 short, firm knocks. When Troy opened it and saw who was there, something moved across his face, a flicker of genuine alarm, the first real emotion Darcy had seen from him all evening. "Mr. Holloway, I wasn't expecting." "I can see that." Kendrick looked past him into the apartment, then back at Troy. "Your wife is standing in the hallway. You changed the locks without telling her." "This is a private matter." "Your wife works 14-hour shifts at a hospital," Kendrick said. "She came home to find she can't get into her own apartment. That's not a private matter, that's something else entirely." Troy's jaw tightened. "I'd appreciate if you didn't insert yourself into my marriage." "Your marriage appears to be over, based on what I'm seeing." Kendrick's voice was perfectly level. "So I'd appreciate if you'd tell me whether Mrs. Lefebvre has somewhere safe to go tonight." Darcy hadn't cried yet. She wasn't going to cry in this hallway. She pressed her fingernails into her palm and breathed through it. "I have a sister in Calgary," she said. "I can call her." "It's 11 o'clock at night," Kendrick said. "Call her tomorrow." He turned back to Troy. "My building has a furnished guest suite on the 4th floor for clients and visiting colleagues. It's empty this week." He looked at Darcy. "If you'd like to use it, it's yours. Nurse. Just somewhere to sleep tonight while you sort out next steps." "She doesn't need your charity," Troy said. "I wasn't talking to you." Kendrick held Darcy's gaze. "It's your choice." She looked at the closed door of her apartment, the wreath, the sensor panel, the little scuff mark at the bottom, where she'd nudged it open with her foot 1,000 mornings carrying 2 cups of coffee. She looked at Kendrick Holloway, who had no reason to be kind to her and was being kind anyway. "Yes," she said, "thank you, I'll take it." She did not look at Troy as she walked to the elevator. The guest suite was on the 4th floor of a building on Adelaide, 15 minutes away by cab. It was quiet and tastefully furnished, and smelled like cedar and clean linen. Kendrick left her with the key, the building's concierge number, and a container of leftovers from his housekeeper that she ate standing at the kitchen counter at midnight, because she hadn't eaten since noon. She slept for 4 hours, then she sat up in the unfamiliar dark and started thinking. She opened her laptop. 3 years ago, when they'd consolidated their finances, Troy had suggested they share a backup email address for important documents, leases, insurance, tax filings. Darcy barely used it. She'd assumed Troy did the same. She typed in the password and the inbox loaded. She almost closed it, almost. Instead, she started reading. There were messages going back 18 months. Chelsea's last name was Pryor. She was 26 and worked in client relations at a tech startup Troy's firm had recently taken on as a client. That was how they'd met. Darcy pieced together at a product launch in February that Troy had said was mandatory and dull. The emails were explicit enough that Darcy read them with her jaw clenched and her eyes dry, the way she looked at difficult things at work. Not because she felt nothing, but because feeling it fully would have to wait. But the emails were not the worst part. The worst part was a folder labeled simply logistics. Troy had been meticulous. He had, over the course of the past 8 months, since the surgery she registered, since the week after they'd come home from the hospital when she'd cried, and he'd held her and said it didn't matter, been moving money, small amounts first, then larger ones, into an account registered to a numbered company she'd never heard of. He had taken her off the tenant insurance policy in April. In June, he had contacted the building's leasing office about transferring sole responsibility for the lease to his name, citing personal circumstances. There was an email to a real estate lawyer about the condo they'd been planning to buy together, the one they'd made an offer on in March. Troy had quietly removed her name from the application. The mortgage was pre-approved in his name only. One email to Chelsea from 7 months ago read, "Just need to get the timing right. Once the accounts are sorted, there's nothing keeping me there. She won't see it coming." Darcy sat very still for a long time. Then she opened a new document and began making a list. By 4 in the morning she had the list, a timeline, screenshots of every email, and copies of every financial document she could access, all saved to her personal cloud. Her nursing training had made her methodical. You documented things clearly and completely because detail mattered and memory didn't. When the sun came up over the lake she was still awake, but she wasn't frightened anymore. She was something colder and more focused than frightened. Kendrick was already in the lobby when she came downstairs. He handed her a cup of coffee, real coffee from the cafe next door, and said, "I made some calls last night." "What kind of calls?" "I know a family lawyer, Harpreet Aulak. She's one of the best in the city, and she's agreed to meet you this morning at 9 if you're willing." Darcy wrapped both hands around the cup. "Why are you doing this?" He was quiet for a moment. "My sister went through something like this 12 years ago. Different details, same pattern. A husband who spent years building an exit while she was focused on keeping everything together. By the time she found out he'd moved most of their assets, she had to start from nothing." He looked out through the lobby doors at the street. "I got there too late to help her. I've never quite forgiven myself for that." Darcy thought about her own sister in Calgary, who she would call that afternoon. "Is she okay now, your sister?" "She is. It took time." He looked back at her. "You don't have to take the referral, but I think you should." "I found things last night," Darcy said, "in the shared email account. 18 months of correspondence with the other woman. Money transferred into a numbered company. He took me off the insurance. He removed my name from the mortgage application we made together." She paused. "He'd been planning this for at least 8 months, since the surgery." Kendrick's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went quiet and serious. "Do you have documentation?" "I have everything." "Then bring it to Harpreet." Harpreet Aulak's office was on King Street, 10th floor, with a view of the financial district. She was in her late 40s, with close-cropped natural hair, and the manner of someone who had heard every version of this story and still found it worth her full attention. She listened without interrupting while Darcy described the previous evening. Then she took the USB drive and loaded the files. She read for 12 minutes without speaking. "The numbered company," she said finally. "Do you know what it does?" "Not yet. We'll find out." She made a note. "The lease transfer request is interesting. He initiated it in June, but it typically takes 60 to 90 days for building management to process a change of that nature. Depending on the timeline, it may not have gone through yet." "What does that mean for me?" "It means you may still have legal standing as a co-tenant, which significantly complicates his ability to simply lock you out. He'd need a court order to remove a co-tenant, and a judge would want to know why." She looked up. "Did he say anything to you in front of witnesses last night?" "Kendrick Holloway was there. He heard most of it." Harpreet wrote it down. "What did your husband say about the surgery?" Darcy told her. The words felt ugly in the morning light. Harpreet recorded them without any change in expression, and somehow that steadiness was more comforting than sympathy would have been. "I'm going to file for divorce on your behalf today. I'm also filing an emergency motion to freeze the joint accounts and the numbered company assets before he can move anything further. And I'm sending a letter to building management this afternoon, notifying them that the tenant transfer request is disputed and cannot proceed while family law proceedings are active. Can you do all of that today?" "That's what we do." Harpreet slid a retainer agreement across the desk. "Kendrick has already arranged for the initial costs. Before you object," she raised one hand. "He considers it a personal matter. You can sort out the details with him later. Right now, let's focus on you." Darcy signed. Her hand was steady. Back in the guest suite that evening, her phone showed 41 missed calls from Troy. She deleted the notifications. There was a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Just so you know, he was never going to stay. No one who wants a family wants a woman who can't give them one. Move on." She read it once, screenshotted it, forwarded it to Harpreet, and blocked the number. Then she called her sister. Her sister cried. Darcy didn't, not yet. She took notes instead, the way she took notes at the end of a difficult shift, because putting things in order helped. On Monday morning she returned to the hospital. Her shift supervisor, Janet, found her at the nursing station at 7:30 and pulled her aside. A man called before your shift. Claimed to be your husband, said there was a family emergency. He was asking for your schedule. Darcy closed her eyes briefly. What did you tell him? That we don't give out staff schedules to anyone, full stop. He got loud about it. Janet squeezed her arm. I've also asked security to hold anyone asking for you at the front entrance and call upstairs first. Thank you. Do you want to tell me what's happening? I'm getting divorced. It was the first time she'd said it out loud. My husband had been planning it for a while, and isn't handling the consequences graciously. Janet nodded slowly. Take what you need. Adjusted shifts, time off, we'll manage. I'd rather work. I know you would. Janet patted her arm once. You're better at this than you think. Troy was served with divorce papers on Tuesday. By Wednesday morning he had called Harpreet's office 14 times and showed up at Kendrick's building asking the concierge to relay a message to Darcy, which the concierge did not do. On Thursday he reached her from a number she hadn't blocked yet. She answered by accident. You're ruining my life. His voice was ragged now, raw in a way it hadn't been that night in the hallway. Harpreet, Alak has frozen everything. I can't access the business account, I can't. You created a numbered company and moved marital assets into it without telling me, Darcy said. Those are your choices, Troy, I documented them. You went through my emails. The address you set up for both of us to use, for important documents. She kept her voice level. Please don't contact me again. Everything goes through Harpreet. She hung up, her hands were not shaking. On Friday afternoon Harpreet called with news Darcy hadn't expected. Kendrick's firm received your financial documentation as part of a broader internal review. Harpreet's voice was careful. It appears that some of the expenses Troy submitted as client entertainment over the past year were connected to Chelsea Pryor and the tech startup account. He was claiming personal expenses as business costs, hotels, dinners. A weekend in Mont-Tremblant he filed under client hospitality. How much? Initial estimate is around $38,000. The firm has suspended him pending investigation and will likely terminate and refer to police. Darcy sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. He's going to lose his job. He's already lost it. A pause. The fraud referral will happen regardless of your involvement. The firm has a legal obligation, but if you're willing to testify about how you discovered the documentation, it strengthens the case considerably. I'll testify. Then, you will. Kendrick found her in the guest suite kitchen that evening, where she sat with a cup of tea and her laptop, going over a document Harpreet had sent. You don't have to apologize, she said before he could speak. I know, he sat across from her. I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. I found an apartment, she said, near the hospital, available in 3 weeks. He nodded. Something in his face was carefully neutral. That's good. I want to pay you back. For Harpreet, for the suite, for all of it. You don't owe me anything. I know I don't, I still want to. She looked down at her tea. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why did you come upstairs yourself that night? You could have left the portfolio at the desk. He was quiet for a moment. Then the elevator was already there, and I thought I'd save the concierge a trip. He paused. When I stepped out and saw your face, He shook his head slightly. I couldn't get back in. Darcy held his gaze for a moment longer than was strictly necessary, then looked back at her laptop. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. But something in the quiet of the room settled differently after that, the way temperature changes before rain. The divorce hearing fell on a Tuesday morning in November. Darcy wore a dark blazer over a simple dress. Harpreet had told her to look like herself, not like someone performing composure. Troy's lawyer argued that Darcy had conspired with Kendrick to manufacture evidence. The judge, a woman in her 60s with the expression of someone who had heard this particular argument before and found it deeply unpersuasive, asked for supporting evidence. Troy's lawyer offered his client's testimony. Harpreet offered emails, bank statements, 2 signed affidavits from neighbors who had witnessed the hallway scene, a statement from Kendrick Holloway, documentation of the insurance removal, the lease transfer request, the numbered company transactions, and the expense fraud file. The judge asked Troy directly whether he had told his wife that no man would want her following her surgery. He said he had been upset and hadn't meant it literally. The judge wrote something down and did not look up for a long moment. The ruling came an hour later. The condo purchase, the one Troy had removed Darcy's name from, was deemed a marital asset, its deposit drawn from joint savings, and Darcy was entitled to her share of the equity. The frozen accounts were to be divided 65-35 in her favor given that documented financial misconduct. Spousal support was set for 2 years, conditional on Troy maintaining employment, which, as everyone in the courtroom understood, was not currently the case. Troy stood when the judge finished, and for a moment looked like he might say something. His lawyer put a hand on his arm. Darcy walked out into the corridor, where Harpreet immediately began explaining timelines and next steps. Darcy listened and took notes the way she always did. Troy caught up to her near the elevator. His lawyer had stepped away. "I made a mistake," he said. The flatness was gone from his voice. He just sounded tired and smaller than she remembered him. "I know that's not enough, I just wanted to say it." "You didn't make a mistake," Darcy said quietly. "You made a plan. For 8 months while I was recovering from surgery and going to work and trying to hold things together, you made a very careful plan. A mistake is something different." He opened his mouth. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Troy." She meant it, in the distant, settled way that she meant things that no longer required anything from her. "I genuinely do, but I'm not part of it." The elevator arrived, she got in. 6 months later, Darcy Lefevre sat at her own kitchen table in her own apartment. 1 bedroom, large windows, close enough to the hospital that she could hear sirens if the wind was right, and reviewed a package she had put together for the nurses' union wellness coordinator. It had started small. A colleague named Patricia had come to her 3 months after the divorce was final, confused and frightened, asking questions about joint accounts and what to do when you suspected your partner was hiding money. Darcy had sat with her for 2 hours and explained what she knew. She had given Patricia Harpreet's name. Patricia's situation had resolved well. She'd mentioned Darcy to 2 other women. Darcy had told them the same things: document everything, get your name onto your own accounts, know what you're entitled to under provincial law. She had written up a guide, 4 pages, plain language, what to look for and where to go, and the union wellness coordinator had asked if it could be distributed broadly. So Darcy was at her kitchen table refining it, making sure the legal sections were accurate, when her phone rang. Kendrick. They had coffee every few weeks now. Sometimes dinner. It was quiet and easy in the way things were easy when neither person was trying too hard. Darcy was not in a hurry. After years of organizing her life around someone else's timeline, she found she quite liked moving at her own pace. "I read the guide," he said. "It's really clear, practical." Harpreet helped with the legal sections. Janet helped me get the tone right. She looked at the pages on her table. "The union wants to translate it into Tagalog and Punjabi. 2 of the nurses said their mothers couldn't read it otherwise." "Darcy." He said her name with a steadiness she was still getting used to. "I'm glad I came upstairs that night." She looked at the window. Outside, the November sky was the flat gray of early evening, and the streetlights on the block were just coming on one by one. "So am I," she said. After they hung up, she stayed at the table a while longer, in the quiet apartment that was entirely hers. The plants she'd chosen, the bookshelf she'd arranged, the photograph of her and her sister taken last summer in Banff that she'd framed and put near the kitchen so she could see it in the mornings. Troy was awaiting trial on the fraud charges. Chelsea Pryor had moved to another city. Darcy had not followed either story closely. She had enough of her own to follow. She thought about the woman she'd been that night in the corridor, exhausted, keycard in hand, trying to understand how her life had become something she didn't recognize. She couldn't go back and tell that woman not to be afraid, but she could do the thing she had always done, the thing that had carried her through 14-hour shifts and frightening diagnoses, and 8 months of recovery. When the person who was supposed to be beside her had already started to leave, she could pay close attention, document carefully, and make sure that what had happened to her was genuinely useful to someone else. She picked up her pen and kept writing.